Hi, everyone, and welcome to the special presentation I've put together on turning ducks into eagles. I put it together for all of the people of the CXSA, but in reality, it will be on YouTube, and anybody who can watch this, who'd like to watch this, can do so. My name is Aki Kalyatakis, and I'm the managing partner of the Leadership Launchpad. And I've been doing this for almost 40 years now. I hope that you can still see how much I love what I actually do over here. And this particular topic today is one which is close to my heart, because at the end of the day, we know that without a decent employee experience, there can be no customer experience. I'd like to begin with a story about a conference center called Gallagher Estate in Midrand near Johannesburg. And I was at this huge conference. I think the audience was probably close to about 1,000 people. And while waiting for my slot, about 10 minutes before I'm due to go on, I was just faffing around and I suddenly dropped my notes. And as I bent down to pick them up, I promptly ripped my pants right from the front to the back. It was just ripped and there was just air flowing through over there. I was calm for about 5 seconds and then a huge panic hit me. And I rushed up to a young woman at the reception area over there. And I said to her, "Have you got a stapler or something?" And she could obviously see how panic stricken I was. And she said, "Why? What's the problem?" I said, "I've just split my pants from front to back." And I showed her. And she said to me, "No, I can't give you a stapler. You're going to prick yourself." She said, "Please come with me." And she took me to a little room on the side and she showed me inside, and she stood outside the door and she said to me, "Right, go in there and take off your pants." And of course, it's been a long time since anybody ever asked me to take off my pants. So I already felt much better. But as I handed over my pants, I saw that she had a sewing kit. Who knows where she got it? And she quickly did a fix-up job so that I could go on stage without anybody knowing the difference. Handed them back to me, and literally with a couple of minutes to spare, I popped onto the stage and I did my song and dance act. You see, that day she made a choice. And, I always wonder, how come is it that some people, a very small group of people, are actually able to take responsibility for these kinds of things and to give customers an amazing experience, while the majority don't? Part of it, of course, is who they are internally, but a big chunk of it is also about the way we treat people and the respect that we show them in our organizations. And so from that perspective, I'd like to just quickly share with you that my last real boss ever was a wonderful man by the name of Henry Bernstein. He was a pharmacist, and they always say that having a boss, a great boss, particularly early in your career, is like having rich parents. I really agree with that. And one day I was sitting with Henry, who was the chief executive of the organization, and I was complaining about one of my employees, an employee from hell. Her name was Dorian. And I must have been, moaning and groaning about how impossible she was and how she wasn't cooperating and so on. And he interrupted me at one stage and he said the following words. He said, "Uckles, there are no bad employees, just bad managers." Boy, that hurt me, okay? And it took me a few years, but he was absolutely right. I eventually accepted that he was absolutely right. You see, our employees come to us as these amazing, beautiful flowers. But from the day that they were born, somebody has been plucking out all of those beautiful petals one by one by one by one. It could be at school, it could be their friends, it could even be people in their family, whether they've been bullied or told they were stupid or something like that. And life kind of has this ability to destroy people. And your job and my job are to gather those petals together again and somehow perform this miracle of putting it all together again. It's hard. Now, let me tell you why I've called this presentation Turning Ducks into Eagle. It comes from a paragraph of a book by Dr. Wayne Dyer, written many years ago. The book was called If You Believe It, Then You Will See It. And he basically said that there are two kinds of people in life. First of all, there are ducks. Ducks are the victims. They just waddle around and just go quack, 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 and they sit on the pond just waiting to be taken out. Eagles, on the other hand, are the people who take responsibility and they own the skies and they soar above the crowd and they go out there and feed their family and they see the big picture over there, and they are more like that flower that we were talking about over there. You see, if we ask this question over here, why don't people just do what they're supposed to do? We could come up with dozens of reasons. They don't know why they should. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't know how to do it. Maybe something else is more important, as a bigger priority. Perhaps they're rewarded for not doing it, or maybe they're punished for doing it. They're afraid that they will fail or afraid they will be successful. You see, if they succeed at taking care of customers, then guess what? Everybody's going to go to them and say, oh, I've got a big problem over here. Please, will you help me out over here? There was a wonderful experiment that we did with one of our clients. It was in the days when there were lots of secretaries in companies. And what we did was we went to all of the secretaries and we gave them a couple of letters. And each one of them, in fact, got 4 letters, 2 which were, internal memos. And the boss said to them when he handed over those letters, could you just give these to me? I want to just read them before I sign them. And then 2 of the other 4 letters were then letters to customers. And the boss said to them in handing it over, please just type it up and just sign it on my behalf and you can send them out. And of course, we then took a look at the results afterwards. And you know what we discovered? That when the secretaries knew that their bosses were going to look at this letter, they made sure that everything was done properly, every single I dotted and T crossed. But when it came to the letters to the customers, we picked up a lot of errors and problems and inconsistencies over there. And so from that perspective, this is what kind of happens. It's that old story. You get what you inspect, but it's got to go deeper than that. We can't force people, okay? And, Christine Porath in her TED Talk is a wonderful TED Talk and highly recommend that you go and watch it. She was talking about respect and she said, how you show up and treat people means everything. Either you lift people up by respecting them and making them feel valued, appreciated, and heard, or you hold people down by making them feel small, insulted, disregarded, or excluded. Who you choose to be means everything. And it's really about, corporate bullies and people who don't show respect. And what she noted, of course, was that was more important to employees than recognition and appreciation and communication and inspiring vision and providing useful feedback, even opportunities for learning and growth and development was the way that they were respected. That is just absolutely critical important. You see, telling people to just do it just doesn't do it. It's quite simple, all right? And the reason for that is because motivation is a door that is closed from the inside. So at the end of the day, if they don't make that choice, it doesn't matter how much you try and exhort them and give them, all sorts of bonuses and so on. It's a very short-lived thing. So the question then is, how do we create that environment where that motivation door can be opened? And I'm sometimes stuck a little bit because you all know that gloomy research that came from Gallup Corporation, been done with millions of employees and concluded that somewhere around 80%, more than 80% now since COVID, of all employees in business feel disengaged and uncommitted to the companies that they work for. But you know what the most surprising factor is? It happens at all levels of the company. There are some executives, director level people who also feel uncommitted and disengaged from the businesses. I saw this once, which I really quite liked. It was one of those little surveys. In your ideal world, would you rather be the boss or the employee? And somebody said, no, none of the above. It's not about power games, okay? We've all heard that expression that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And while nobody likes to hear this, as I said to you earlier, there are no bad employees, just bad managers. And yeah, there might be a small, tiny, fractional percentage of, really difficult people. But the reality is most people don't go in on their first day at work and say, I think I'm going to screw this one up. I'm going to show them what a terrible employee I am. You see, work itself is not fun. If you take a look at most large organizations, we have customers from hell and pettiness and bureaucracy and corporate ladders and unreasonable goals, petty politics, strategic short-sightedness, lots of testosterone, process pushers, spreadsheet junkies, fat egos, private silos, dinosaur CEOs, routine, mean-spiritedness, conformity, complacency, and the list just goes on and on and on. And if you don't do something about that, they will upset your customers. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And I'd like to just share with you something which I picked up almost 30 years ago. And it goes something like this, that if we take a look at, on the one scale, if we look at staff satisfaction, their perceptions, the way they report to us, how they feel about working in a particular business, they will either rate it as obviously low. And by low, I mean, let me just get the laser pointer here. By low, I mean that they're highly dissatisfied. They express dissatisfaction with, their working conditions with their boss and so on. Or they'll be at the other extreme where they say, wow, wow, this is the best company in the world, and I really love working here, and I got the best boss in the world, and I don't think I'm ever going to move. But if we take a look at the other scale and we look at their actual behavior, we look at the loyalty to the business, now not their perception anymore. Once again, they are doing, sometimes do very undesirable things. They sabotage, they gossip, they treat customers poorly, they argue with everything. And at the other extreme, we have them as incredibly loyal to the business, that they work late, they will die for their boss, they will do anything to make sure the company looks good. Now, what we have then is a combination of four broad areas, okay? We have obviously in the top right-hand corner, the angels, okay? The people who feel like they are partners in the business, they're advocates for the business. They're the best to have, but let's be honest over here. Maybe if we're lucky, 5% of the people in your organization feel that way. Hopefully you are one of them. But if we take a look a little bit further now, we also have people who appear to be loyal to the company. And this is particularly relevant right now, where in the United States of America, they're talking about this great resignation. While they were stuck, they were hostages, okay? While the economy was poor, while we had COVID happening over there, we had a whole bunch of hostages. And given the first attempt, the first opportunity, they all escaped in huge companies, okay? And so many employees in our country just don't have a choice for whatever reason. If they feel trapped, a few of them might in fact then turn into terrorists, okay? And the reality is that, again, thank goodness, a minority of your employees, the people that you work with, 3, 4, maybe 5%, are those terrorists. They do damage. It's not good to have these people on board, and they're the ones who take all that action because they are miserable, but they also want to show, and they, as I said earlier, they gossip, they sabotage, they backstab, they treat customers poorly, and so on and so on and so on. But I want to tell you that the most dangerous area is that missing area, this one over here in the top, bottom right-hand corner. And those are what I like to call the mercenaries. They don't give a damn about who they deal with, okay? They're really not there for any other reason except for the pay over there. And all they want to do is just get the best possible deal and put in the least possible effort over there. And I call them mercenaries because all they're worried about is themselves. They don't care, whose side they're on. They're not really interested. And we have to shift this large group away from where they are right now and turn them into angels. Of course, we have to do something about the other two areas as well, but really, we've got to get the basics right over there. And our job is getting all of the negative or neutral customers into the top right-hand corner. Of course, there is good news. There's always a silver lining over there. And that silver lining is just about anything nice that you do for your customers, no matter how small, and obviously for your employees, no matter how small, will probably be better than what they get wherever else they work. You can be that little beacon in the hope of a beacon of hope in the sea of despair, and you don't know anything about them. They might have just had a crappy day yesterday. They might have got problems at home. They might have had an almost near-miss accident in their car on their way to work. They might have had a fight with a taxi driver. There are lots of potential reasons why they feel bad. And we are there as their managers to pick up the pieces. You see, little things make the biggest difference in people's lives. It was a wonderful experiment done in a company in Germany and now repeated all over the world, including in South Africa. What they did is they placed a small coin on a photocopying machine, just, on top of the photocopying machine, the equivalent of 2 Rand, okay? And as people came in and out, they kind of looked at this thing and, some of them just put it straight in the pocket. Others would go to the nearest person and say, well, does this belong to anybody? And when, they just didn't know, they put it into their pocket, okay? But the really important part of this experiment came late on, because you see what happened is at the end of that particular day, everyone in that particular division was asked what kind of a day they'd had. How's your day been, okay? And people who found that little miserable 2 Rand coin were significantly happier. It's the power of serendipity, okay? That you just out of the blue, something really nice happens over there. And of course, yes, it does affect the brain chemicals and, releases serotonin and all those other good things over there. But I think it's much more than that. It gives us a good feeling inside, okay? It's not just about the chemical reaction. Of course, the Dalai Lama of Tibet being one of my most important heroes in my life, okay? He's basically gone and made his life of, just making the comments that, this is not rocket science, okay? But really it's about, you can start off by doing, intelligent little random acts of kindness. He was once asked by Leo Buscaglia in an interview, okay, what is the purpose of life? And he said the following, he said, the purpose of life is to help others. And then he paused for a little while and he said, and if you can't help them, then would you at least please not hurt them? And I think that's just so important. If you can't help somebody, please at least just don't hurt them. You see, we know that the only consistent way to deliver perfect customer experiences is through people. Your competitors might be able to imitate just about everything else that you do, your systems, your processes, your products, your branches, everything. But the only real source of advantage is people. And from people then emerges innovation and all those other wonderful things. Tony Hsieh of a later CEO of Zappos, in his book, Delivering Happiness, made this point, okay, customer service shouldn't be a department, it should be the entire company. And I think it was Richard Branson who made the point that, if you're not serving somebody who's, if you're not serving a customer, you are serving somebody who is servicing a customer. And that is just so important over there. I'd like to share another quick story with you of somebody I encountered in Gaborone. It's a young lady. Her name is Ausi Loratov Peto. Okay, she works at the KFC in Gaborone, and she won the National Customer Service Award in Botswana a couple of years ago. All right, and she was interviewed in the newspaper. Okay, and what happened is they said to her, so what is it? And she basically said, I love my job. I love people. She just had that same wonderful attitude towards her customers, and her customers loved her. Okay, and amongst other things, she sometimes joked when she saw a person walking in, she would say, hello, my salary, okay, and hello, my favorite person, and she would pay compliments 100 times a day, and she was just absolutely fantastic, always smiling. In fact, when this was reported on social media, a lot of people said, oh no, man, you should promote her, she should become the manager of that branch. And she wrote back and said, no, don't make me the manager. I want to be where I am because I love people. Okay, you see, this kind of attitude is the eagle attitude over there. She hasn't forgotten that she's that magical flower. And yet in most businesses, if you take a look at this question, what's it like for employees? You have, on the one hand, that in some jobs, and if you're in one of these jobs, that is absolutely fantastic. You get satisfaction from the work that you do. I've been privileged and lucky for 40 years plus. I've gotten a lot of satisfaction, high levels of satisfaction from the work that I do. I love what I do. I love meeting people. I love the topic that I talk. I've traveled all over the world. I just love, just by far, 95% of what I do is just amazing for me. Okay, and sadly, in many jobs, in the salt mines of the call centers and everywhere else, people don't get a lot of satisfaction. They're in routines and all those other things that we spoke about. But really, occasionally, we have a situation where the work itself is worth something. It makes us feel good. But then at the other end, we look at your satisfaction at work. What's it like actually at work? Not only with your boss, but the actual place that you work at. And once again, it could be absolutely terrible, but it could also be absolutely high. It would be wonderful, all the wonderful people that you work with, and the beautiful canteen, and the fact that there's a gym and they take care of your children, and medical aid is paid for, and all those other wonderful things. All right. Now, of course, if you're in the low, that's absolutely unforgivable. And I want to just take a second over here to focus on the satisfaction from work, okay? You might not be able to do much to increase the satisfaction from the boring and routine jobs. After all, we need call centers, okay? And I've got some suggestions, but to neglect to create something in that wonderful environment at work is absolutely criminal. Now, let's just come back to the satisfaction from work and what you can do with some of those routine jobs. It's a very boring set of slides, okay? Obviously, by the way, the top right-hand corner is the ideal place to be, but it's not always going to be possible, all right, to have great satisfaction from the work and work in a great environment. But now this slide is looking a little bit boring, and I have to, express it clearly. That's why I've written it down. But if you want someone to do a good job, then give them a good job to do. That came from, I think, one of the 1-Minute Manager books. Okay, it's not always possible to give them a good job. So if you want to enrich their jobs, all right, that's what we used to call it in the old days. For example, you can assign small projects and little startups which require learning new tasks, working under time pressure, and dealing with new groups of people. So instead of putting them, to work full-time 5 days a week, 4.5 weeks a month in their call center job, you can give them a couple of hours off to, work on small little interesting projects that they can volunteer for. Another thing is to assign small scope jumps and fix-its, which emphasize team building, individual responsibility, dealing with the boss, encouraging or motivating subordinates, or managing time pressure. So there's always some little project that you can get involved with, some improvement thing where, again, for a couple of hours a month, or with a bit of luck, a couple of hours a week, they come up with ideas on what you can do about that. All right. Another one is to give them small strategic assignments and projects which emphasize, their presentation and analysis skills. You could go to them and say, hey, listen, we really have a problem with this particular software or this particular hardware or this particular type of customer. And what you do is you then, say to them, go out and take a look at what these things are. In fact, send them to companies that get it right. Give them a bit of a budget, send them to McDonald's and say to them, go and have lunch at McDonald's, but come back with at least 10 ideas of what we can learn from McDonald's, that type of thing. All right. And have people run training courses, especially your more experienced staff who are into that routine and they, have really had enough of, the boring old work. Well, get them to run some training or some seminars or some workshops. Let them start from scratch. Give them coaching assignments that require them to not only learn maybe something new, but be intellectually challenging, but also to present this to others. It gives them that sense of importance. All right. And then another idea is to, have your employees undertake activities away from work that emphasize individual leadership skills or working with new people, learning to influence and persuade others. So in the most obvious of cases, you can send those people to your customers to help your customers with certain things. But some businesses who have got, a lot of, giving back to the community time work, they then will give employees time off. I know my wife in her last job used to get, 1 day a month off to go and work in the charity of her choice, helping them with their systems, their processes, feeding old people, taking care of children, doing things that where they were, doing something special, giving back to society, but getting a chance to also practice their leadership skills. So what are the secrets then of happy workplaces and unhappy workplaces? How do we now create the satisfaction at work? We've looked at, how you can increase the satisfaction from the work, but what about the at work? And this is where I'm going to tell you just lots of random stories over here. We know that there are certain habits in happy workplaces, all right? Is it about paying incentives? Well, the answer is yes and no. And most of you know what the answer here over here is. Do people who get paid better do a better job? Not necessarily, okay? But what we do know for sure, and research backs us up, is that a lack of decent pay, when people feel they aren't being paid enough, when they're struggling from their, with their day-to-day lives, okay, then obviously increasing their salary can make a difference. So for example, a woman who comes home from work and then has to feed the children and then has to wash the dishes and do the homework with them, that is hard because she's exhausted from a day of work already. And if she doesn't have a supportive husband, then, it's just exhausting. And, she finally gets to bed at 11 or 12 o'clock before she can then, wake up at 5 o'clock the next morning to get everybody ready and then, leave at 6 o'clock to catch a taxi to work. So it's very hard. So if you pay her better, then she can get a dishwasher, she can buy ready-made meals from Woolworths or whatever, she can maybe even afford to get a house, buy a house closer to where she works. You understand what I'm talking about? So a lack of money does demotivate, but extra money does not always motivate. I think the other thing also I want to talk about in terms of salary and money is it's out of your hands, okay? Usually the chief financial officer will say the across the board increases this year are going to be 4.5%. And there's really not much you can do to play around with that. You might give somebody a 1% higher and then somebody else's gets 1% lower. You know what I'm talking about over here. Another thing about happy workplaces is, that old accepted thing that hell is other people by Jean-Paul Sartre, but he was very seriously wrong, okay? In fact, the people I hang around with at work are the people who sometimes make work pleasant. And I'm not talking only about the boss, I'm talking about colleagues, okay? So what does create happiness? Well, one of the things that we know doesn't create happiness, okay, is we have the usual suspects: respect, trust, authenticity, okay? I was in a company recently, a huge factory employing almost 2,000 staff. And I was there at the end of the day. And as people were leaving, underneath the gates where they were leaving, there was, well, first of all, above the gates, there was a big sign, okay? And the big sign was one of those very, those very paternalistic things that said something like, "Our most precious assets leave here at night and go home to their families." But right underneath that sign, right below that sign, they had 6 turnstiles, and the security guards were physically searching every single employee on their way out. It was a long queue going all the way back to the factory of people waiting. They were excited to go home, but now they needed to be searched. I might add, in that same business, the managers of the company actually were able to drive their cars into the gates of the company and just happily drove out there waving their hands. People hate that hypocrisy, and we've got to look in the mirror and look at ourselves over there. It's really about, trusting people. That same Henry Bernstein fellow, who was my last real boss ever, he was just an amazing man. And, he said to me once, Ackles, he said to me, "I'm going on a trip overseas, but I'm supposed to be doing a speech for the Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa. Could you do the speech for me?" Well, I thought that what he meant was he would give me the speech and I would read it for him. I said, "Sure." He said, I said, "So what must, we must get this thing." He said, "No, you just write it. I know you're good at this kind of stuff. Just write the speech. Just say whatever you want to, just, you've got 20 minutes. Just do what you need to do." Man, I worked so hard on the speech. I don't think I've ever worked so hard on a speech, because there was something at stake over here. He had trusted me, okay, with an important speech, and I just didn't want to let him down over there. I think it was Simon Sinek, in his book Real Leaders Eat Last. He said, in the military, we honor the leaders who sacrifice themselves for the good of others. Okay. In business, we do exactly the opposite. In business, we honor those who sacrifice others. I think that's absolutely awful. So we've got to take a deep look in the mirror. Okay. People always say that when I'm happy at work, it's because I've got a good boss, a fair boss, and compatible colleagues, okay? And I think it's just so important for us to remember that. Yes, of course, it also is about that sense of purpose and making a difference over there. There's no doubt about it. Again, Simon Sinek, start with the why. And I don't even like talking about mission statements. I rather say, should we rather be talking about passion statements? That's what we want, not a mission statement, a passion statement. What are the things that we are absolutely passionate about? One of my favorite ones came from Roberto Goizueta many years ago. He passed away from cancer many years ago, but he was the most successful CEO that Coca-Cola ever had, particularly from a shareholder perspective. And apparently he was at a conference once, and he was listening to everybody making excuses of why, they couldn't increase sales of Coca-Cola. He had asked all of the country managers to make a speech about how they were going to increase, by 10-15% in a year type of thing and so on. And eventually he slammed down his pen. He rushed up to the stage, grabbed the microphone, and he made the following statement. He said, "You know what my vision is for Coca-Cola? That the home of the future will have 3 taps: hot, cold, and Coke. Only then can we truly say that we have saturated the market." Okay. And you see, in that comment, I'm sure he knew that there would never be a situation where there would be hot, cold, and Coke in every home in the world. But he was saying, don't just make excuses. Let's have something to dream of over here. Of course, in my house, the day you find me retiring is when I've got hot, cold Coke and brandy. Then you'll never see me again. Okay. Another good one, which I really like, comes from Stu Leonard's, one of the most successful retail spaces, square meter for square meter, absolutely one of the most successful in the whole world. And this is Stu Leonard Jr., who took over the business from his dad, okay? And outside, granite rock is, the policy relating to customers. Our policy, rule number 1, the customer is always right. Rule number 2, if the customer is ever wrong, reread rule 1. Now, that's a very symbolic gesture. And there's a wonderful story told about this by Tom Peters, where he says that one day the security manager walked up to Stu Leonard Jr. and he said, come here, I want to show you something on a video here. And they had the security video, and there was a customer at the strawberries. So they had this open plan strawberry area where you could pick your own strawberries and put them in a bag, okay? And the one customer, this particular customer, was putting one strawberry in the bag and one in his mouth, and one strawberry in the bag and one in his mouth. And he was like, doing one for one, helping himself, eating the strawberries while he was packing his little paper bag. So Stu Leonard says to the security manager, okay, I'll go down, I'll take care of it, okay? And he goes down and he says, sir, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, but we're losing money on this deal over here. I noticed that, for every one strawberry you put in the bag, you're eating one yourself. And the customer turned around to him with a very sort of grumpy face and said to him, but the rule says the customer's always right. And Stu Leonard said, sir, I'm terribly sorry, you're absolutely right. And he walked away from it, okay? Now, of course, that story becomes legendary in the telling, and I'm sure I must have exaggerated somewhere. But the point that I'm making is that those are the things that are the very symbolic acts of what we expect from you around here. It's so important, okay? So let's talk about how this has evolved for me over the years. In the old days, and I'm talking now when I first started, as a manager, a green manager 45 years ago, the old model is we used to say people need to be able and willing, okay, to go and do their jobs, whatever job it is that they do. And then at some point, probably around 25 years ago, I added a third one. I said, no, they must be only able and willing, but they must also be allowed, okay? So able, willing, and allowed is how I taught it for many, many years, okay? Because empowerment obviously becomes important. And so from that perspective, obviously it makes a lot of sense. However, okay, there's a lovely model that I picked up recently from a chap on the name of Jay Hyatt. He calls it the ADCOM model, okay? He says that we first need to make people aware. I understand my role, but then I've got to have a desire. I have a desire to serve. It's the culture of the company. But then I also have to have the knowledge, the training and experience and the skills to be able to help that customer. But then I've also got to be able to be given the tools, the authority, the capacity, and finally, the reinforcement, the rewards and recognition that help me to keep doing this over and over and over again. All right. I've changed it a little bit. Over the years, I've said that there's actually now the 10 E's is what I've called them. If you want eagles, well, obviously it starts with enlisting the right people in the first place. But, a lot of people complicate this too much. Now, I know that, many of you are in a human resources role or have come out of that. Recruiting is all about, yes, do they come at the right price and have they had the right experience and did they do the right degree or have the right, diploma or whatever it is, okay? But I always say that we should be asking people, as well as all of those other things, we need to ask them also something like the following. Tell me, how do you feel about customer service or customer care or customer experience? If they say, they scratch their heads and they say, well, come to think of it, I don't think about it a lot. I guess it's important. The alarm bells should start ringing because there isn't an awareness there, okay? On the other hand, if I ask this question of a new recruit and I say, tell me, how do you feel about service? And they say, oh, don't get me started. I think that we are in a situation where we are being ripped off by the people that we spend our money at, and I want and I demand better service. At least there's a consciousness. Now, I'm not saying you must use that question, but questions like that will give you a good idea about the skills of that person, okay? And you can ask yourself in the middle of that interview, if you insist on using interviews, I would much rather go and see that person in action. If they're in a bank, I want to go and see what they're like as a teller. If they are, doing a packing job at the supermarket, I want to go and see what they're like as packers. But if you are going to do an interview, okay, ask yourself, how would I feel if I was a customer sitting at the receiving end of this person's service, okay? It gives us an important place to start. So enlisting, I'm not going to talk anymore about that. You know what you need to do. However, now we come to the three that are right at the top. Engage, explain, and create expectation clarity. These three are the non-negotiables. And I'd like to just pause and look at these three in a little bit more detail. You see, these three critical E's. Engagement is, we've got to be able to talk a lot. I mean, the ultimate form of respect you can give to somebody is communicating with them and listening to them, okay? So ask for their opinions, involve people in decisions, and trust them. Engagement is really about knee to knee, jaw to jaw, formal or informal, okay? And we've got to be able to communicate. I think some of you were at that presentation a little while back where Joseph Micheli did a presentation, but in one of his books, he says you can communicate too much, but you probably aren't, okay? That for me, it really expresses it. You cannot do too much communication, all right? The second one is to explain, why do we do this? If people understand the why, if they understand how what they do is going to impact on the customer, what the consequences are, and why this is so important to us, they're more likely to want to do it. And then the third one is to clarify your expectations. What is expected of me in this new game? What standards am I going to be measured by? What are the consequences to me if I perform or if I don't perform over there? You see, these three are absolutely essential and basic. If you don't do these three as a minimum, if you ignore the others, but if you don't do these three as a minimum, you're dead before you even start. And for me, this is what respect and trust are all about, okay? I think this is just absolutely crucial. They are non-negotiable. But moving on, okay, the next one, number 5, okay, obviously education, training, growing people, giving them experience, letting them occasionally make mistakes. All of those things are absolutely critically important. And there are just so many things that we can do to educate, but make that, that process of education fun as well. We all know how they need to be reminded on a regular basis, reinforce the ideas, but also if they're smiling, and if they're laughing, and if they're having fun, they probably are also remembering more, and they are trying out more, and we make it non-threatening. You guys are experts at this, I don't need to tell you. And then, of course, this issue of empowerment, I cannot emphasize this enough. And it does mean that sometimes people will make expensive mistakes, but we need to live with that and move on. And it starts off simple. This is an example from the Spar superstore in Louis Trichardt. The manager knew that many of the employees working there were earning salaries that they couldn't really come by. They had big families and so on, and huge expenses. So he had this amazing idea. He handed out packets of seeds, and he said to his staff, if you plant these where you live and you bring me vegetables, reasonable vegetables that we can sell in our store, I will buy them from you before I buy from the farmers, okay? It wasn't a very big act, and most of those employees did not actually go out and do it. They thought it was a lot of fun, and they took the seeds and they maybe fed their families. But the point is, it was a symbolic act. He's saying, I'm trying to help you. Give me some more ideas of how I can help you. We know we are living with certain limitations over here, but let me help you over here. And of course, he had to stick with it. And when employees bought him, you know, those crooked cucumbers and carrots that, you know, were still full of soil and whatever, he took the stuff in and helped them. All right. We all heard that classic thing from the employee handbook of Nordstrom. This is a replica of it. Okay, welcome to Nordstrom. You get this book on your first day at work. Okay, a little booklet. We're glad to have you with our company. Our #1 goal is to provide outstanding customer service. That's it, full stop. Set both your personal and professional goals high. We have great confidence in your ability to achieve these. So our employee handbook is very simple. We have only one rule. Okay, the only rule: use your good judgment in all situations. That's it, okay? On your first day, they tell you exactly what they are looking for. And I just love that. It's, again, it's a symbolic promise that we make, that we trust them over there. There's a wonderful case study that comes from one of the car companies situated in East London, okay? They've specifically asked me not to mention who they are, but it's a German company, as you will see. And this case study goes back to the days before East and West Germany actually amalgamated. They've called this the Madiba factor, all right, and you'll see why in a minute, okay? They have two statistics, okay, that they measured in their factory. First of all, the time it takes to build that car in days, the make span, okay, from beginning to end. How long does it take to build this car? And then at the end of the process, the QA guys go and take a look at the number of faults in that car. Okay, so in West Germany, as it was then, okay, It takes them 6 days to build a car from scratch. It's probably improved since then, okay, with robotics and everything. And at the end of the process, they usually pick up 14 faults. In South Africa, unfortunately, the figures were terrible. It took us twice as long, more than twice as long, 14 days to build that car. And at the end of the process, there were, almost 6 times as many faults, okay? And the problem is when you've got 82 different faults, okay, 1 or 2 of them are going to slip through, okay, and the car is going to go to the customer with defects in it, and it creates all sorts of problems. And then Madiba was released from prison. And what happened in 1990, and what happened is that the union and the employees went to the management team and said, we would like to build Madiba a car, okay? And that's when that famous red car was built and handed over to Madiba, okay? By now, most of you know which brand it was, okay? But at the end of that process, they took a look at this, and it took them 4 days to build Madiba's car. And what they discovered is that there were 9 faults. Better than the best employees in the world, the most sophisticated, most well-educated employees in the world. We were better than that. And to his credit, Herr Doctor, who was the managing director of that vehicle manufacturer, he turned around and he said to the management team at the next conference, this is an indictment of us, because what these guys have proven to us is that if they want to, they can. But they just don't want to. And we have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, what is it that we have done? That was a turning point in their history. That whole business changed as a result of that. And it became something that was critically important to their future. So empowerment is an incredibly, powerful thing to do. Okay. All right. The next one is empathy. And I must tell you, recently, I've even started changing my mind about empathy, because empathy is a feeling. It's an intellectual exercise, okay? I prefer talking about compassion, because compassion is about taking action. It's about behavior. It's about going one step beyond. And again, I'd like to pause and just share with you a couple of examples over here. You see, in one of our client companies, I heard the story, okay, where a young lady walked into the business and her child was sick. And she was really quite distraught about this. Now, it's easy for the manager to go to her and to say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that your child is sick. Yeah, why don't you just take the rest of the day off? But he didn't, okay? He said to her, I'm so sorry. He called the people around him and he said, listen, you run this today, okay? I'm taking her to hospital. He took her and her baby to hospital, took her cell phone number, phoned her throughout the day, and when she was finished, he went and he fetched her, okay? And it turned out this little baby had an incredibly high temperature, and they kept the baby in overnight just to bring down the temperature. He could have quite easily have just gotten away with saying, here's some money, take your child to hospital, take the day off. But he chose not to do that. He went one step further. And that, what for me, is what compassion is all about. There's also a wonderful story, and I'm not sure how many of you who are going to view this are from Hollard, but this story is from Hollard Insurance Company, okay? And it goes something like this. It was told to me by the person that this actually happened to, okay? And I've just, his name was Godfrey. So Godfrey was in the call center, and at that stage, Hollard Insurance had contractors in the call center to pick up, they weren't full-time employees. And every 6 months, your contract would be renewed. And, if they didn't need you, you knew that it was the end of your contract. And this chap, Godfrey, who was in the contact center, had a little boy called Nkotlana, okay? And one day, as the supervisor was walking past, she saw him taking a private call. And they did allow at that stage some limited private calls, okay? But it was kind of frowned on a little bit, okay? But the conversation that she overheard went something like this. Obviously, the little boy, his son, Kotlana, phoned his dad and said to his dad, Dad, at Soccer Stars, which was an organization that went into schools and did additional coaching and training on soccer. And he said, Dad, at Soccer Stars, they were at school today, and they said, all of us must go and buy a special Soccer Stars football, okay? And the supervisor heard Godfrey saying to his son, my boy, as you know, the budgets at home are very tight. And this weekend, maybe we'll just go to Pick and Pay or somewhere, and we'll just get you a cheap soccer ball, but we can't afford this thing. Now, you can imagine what a terrible thing it is for a dad to have to tell that to his little boy, that I can't afford to buy you a branded soccer ball. Now, this troubled the supervisor. Her name is Jenny. She was just so troubled with this little event. And it also just so happened by pure coincidence that her son was at another school where Soccer Stars was actually also coaching little kids. And what happened is that she had seen that same request coming through. So the next morning, she calls Godfrey into the little private meeting room. And as he sees this, he thinks to himself, oh my goodness, I must be in trouble. Maybe they want to, not renew my contract. He was worried, obviously, because you don't get called into the private room for nothing. So he gets there and she says to him, sit down. And as they start talking, she reaches down onto the desk and she lifts up a soccer ball. And she said, Godfrey, I'm terribly sorry. I couldn't help but to overhear your conversation with your son yesterday. And no little boy should ever be without a soccer ball. So I'd like you, please, to just accept this as a gift from us, okay? It's one of those balls. I bought two, one for my child and one for you, and I'd like you just to accept this as a gift. Well, apparently the snot and trana were pouring over there. But what happened, okay, is that I got to meet Godfrey afterwards. He was made permanent. In fact, he was appointed team leader a few months after that. And as far as I know, he's still with the company and is maybe even a manager. But when I met him and we had this little conversation where he told me the story, he said to me, and Aki, he said to me, I've put up, and please forgive the language, I'm going to tell you exactly as he said it to me. He said, Aki, I've put up with a lot of shit from this company just for a stupid little soccer ball. But you see, it wasn't about that. He was saying, I'm still loyal to the company. I still love this company. And all because of just a meaningful little compassionate gesture over there. It makes such a big difference. You see, the opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is apathy. And we've got to be careful. I don't think that there are many evil managers out there, okay? But I think that there are many apathetic managers, or they appear to be indifferent because they make everything else a priority instead of their staff, instead of their team. Madiba made this point: as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. We have to be able to, let people be the best they can be and to just give them that humanity. It's so important over there. Simon Sinek uses a wonderful analogy, okay? And please forgive me, I just need to go back over here. But, he says that on the day of the wedding, the father takes his beautiful young daughter up the aisle of the church or the synagogue, or wherever the ceremony is being held, and he hands over his daughter, his precious little daughter. He hands it over to her husband and makes sure that the husband will take care of her for the rest of her life. And we need to imagine that we're doing the same, that our parents, the parents of our employees, the families of our employees, give over their staff, their family members, their loved ones to us to take care of for 8 hours a day. It's a huge responsibility. And we have to bear in mind that it's our loved ones that are going into your job over there. How would you like them to be treated? Would you like them to be treated the way you treat them? You see, empathy is about, being able to do it. Once again at Hollard, okay, one of the founders of Hollard and the chief executive of the business, he actually goes and spends about a day a month in the call center taking calls. The customers who call in don't know that this is actually the boss that actually is doing this. We've got to be able to do this. And I love that program, Undercover Boss. And those of you who've seen it on TV, you know that it always ends up in big hugs and tears over there. But it's because, we get in touch with our humanity again. So this issue of empathy and warmth and compassion and humanity, it's just not negotiable, okay? And by the way, this Undercover Boss leads us to the next of the 10 E's, and that is, okay, example. By their own example, leaders inspire others to want to do what they want to do, okay? And I think this is so important. Sometimes we just throw out a careless little statement like, our customers sometimes drive me mad. And in that process, then we've given everybody else in our department permission to say the same, all right? I think it's just so critically important. You see, our staff watch us. They watch us in more detail than you would ever think, okay? They sometimes know more about you than you actually think. If you're in a bad mood today, they know. If you've changed you bought a new tie, they know about it. You might not even realize that this has happened over there. And as I said, a careless little statement can just, ruin it all over there. I heard a wonderful story from Spurs, okay, where a new employee, a new assistant manager was appointed, and he came to the boss, the owner, the franchisee of the business, and he said, "Boss, we got a big problem over here. The toilets are blocked. What must I do? Who must I phone?" So the owner of the Spur, okay, he says to the employee, the new young employee, he says, "Come with me." Okay, and they go to the broom cupboard where there's a plunger and all the equipment needed to unblock toilets. Okay, and he goes through over into the toilet and he starts unblocking the toilet. And he turns around to this new young employee and he says, "That's what we do around here when the toilet floods. Next time you'll know." Okay, that's what I'm talking about. He was basically saying, if I'm not prepared to do it myself, I'm not expecting you to do it. Okay, another final one over here. A friend of mine by the name of Peter was the operations director in a pharmaceutical company. And in the warehouse, they had tons of expired stock, okay? Just tons and tons of this stuff over there. And, the guys in the forklifts would shift it around, that they were paying insurance on it, and it was just taking place. But nobody wanted to make the decision to get rid of this valuable but expired stock that could never be used again. So what he did was he just, put up a big pile in the parking lot one morning, and he just put all this expired stock in a huge pile, and they locked the gates. And as employees arrived to work, they all said, "Well, what's going on? Why are we being locked out?" And they said, "No, you must go there to the garage, to the parking lot." And he had put a whole big pile over there, and he made a bit of a speech, and he said, "You know what this is over here? This pile, this little mountain over here, it's expired stock." And he took the sledgehammer and he started bashing those things. He bashed it till there was nothing left. And he said, "We have just bashed away literally tens of thousands of rands. I want you to know that expired stock is not acceptable here." Marketing and salespeople, you've got to do your predictions properly. People who manufacture stuff, you've got to be able to do it. We need to have this problem sorted out. We can't afford to just collect this stuff. And of course, in that one gesture, something magical happened over there. It doesn't have to be much, okay? It doesn't have to be huge acts. One of our clients recently said to employees, "Listen, we've just volunteered on Saturday morning. I'm going to throw you a bit of a braai with some boerewors rolls. You can bring your families if you want to, but we're going to take 1 hour to clean up the Yixkay River. Okay, we've got 1 kilometer that is our responsibility. We'll have a bit of a party, do some team building, but we are going to give something back to our community." Okay, it's not a big thing, not a big thing over there. All right, okay, but you can't ever do something which is going to question your integrity over here. I think it was Einstein who said, "Example is not just a way to teach, it is the only way to teach." And in one of our clients, I recently decided that I was going to report this, but there was in the customer facing staff, okay, they had this little in joke over there. They had one employee who was a particularly strong employee, okay, who was given the nickname of the customer ball buster. So whenever there was a difficult customer, they would hand over that difficult customer to the customer ball buster, okay. And I just thought that this was inappropriate to, be so aggressive against customers. So I took it to the manager of that particular department, and he thought this was funny. He thought this was funny. And I said to him, symbolically, we might all laugh, but privately, you might want to laugh, but publicly, you have to let them know that this is unacceptable, because the moment you allow little things like this to become real in your business, you've lost it, okay? And of course, he did make a speech and probably exaggerated, the extent to which the story was. I was there. It was all embarrassing all the way around, but it basically made that message that it's unacceptable for us to be so cynical about our customers. And he ended off in a very gratifying way by saying, "Next time there's a difficult customer, you call me." Okay, so he was taking personal responsibility over there. All right. Now we come to perhaps the one that is the most fun, the most glamorous one of all, okay? Energizing, enthusing your employees, recognizing them, okay? And I'd like to take you back a few years to a long time ago, where I was a huge mountain of a human being. I've managed to lose most of that now. In fact, I'm half the weight I used to be. At this stage, when this photograph was taken, I was about 133 kilograms, and now I'm sitting at about just under 70. So just over half of my weight. And in one of my client companies, the sales director, whenever he saw me in the passages, I was on a project over there, he'd say to me, "Hey, Aki, come here. I want to rub your tummy for luck because you look like a happy Buddha. And we rub the Buddha's tummy for luck over there." And I was always, happy to laugh along, and it was a nice joke, and everything was okay. And then one day, somebody attacked him, and somebody said to him, "That's not fair. Aki's a bit overweight. Maybe he's sensitive about this." And he had such a good turnaround. I mean, he was a typical good sales guy, because he said, "No, we don't only do that to Aki because he's big in body, but also because he's got a big heart." And of course, that's exactly the way I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be known as the person with the biggest heart in the building, the person that was the most generous, the most compassionate in that building. So it wasn't offensive, but the point is, it created a lot of fun, and he tapped into who I was. As I said, typical salesman. Okay. All right. It's not difficult to create some fun in people, okay, to have some fun with people. I was invited once to a Nando's function, the Supplier of the Year award, okay, and sadly, I'm sad to tell you, I didn't win the Supplier of the Year award, but we got a little box with an invitation inside, and on the invitation, it said the following. It says, "You're invited to our party. Dress as casual tuxedos and red chili socks." What? What are these guys talking about? What's a casual tuxedo? Well, inside, we all had this little T-shirt, okay? It was a T-shirt printed with a tuxedo on top. That was saying, yeah, it's a nice formal thing, but, we want to have a little bit of fun with this. And underneath that T-shirt was the brightest red socks I've ever seen in my life, with some, beautiful chilies on them, yellow chilies on them. They were such beautiful socks that they were actually hijacked by my family. I have no idea where they are. But you see, it doesn't take much to be creative. What is Nando's? Nando's is about hot, spicy chicken. So let's include that in everything that we do. Here's another example. I was lucky enough to visit the Virgin Atlantic offices in Hyde Park in Johannesburg when they were there. And I'd been begging them for years to please let me meet Richard Branson. He's my biggest business hero. And for years, I'd been saying to them, please, I don't even want to shake his hand. I just want to be in the same room as him. I'm not going to take a selfie. I'm not going to embarrass you, but please, 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 let me just be in his presence over there. All right. And eventually they gave in to me. Okay. And when I got there, I arrived nice and early, and there were all the staff from the Johannesburg office, okay? And they were all wearing miniskirts. They were all, laughing because they love him just as much as I do. And they had all purposely gone and worn miniskirts and red high-heeled shoes because they know that he's a bit of a womanizer, and that, he loves flirting with beautiful women. And we all know those stories about him. But when I said to them, hey, man, this is like a little bit pushing it. It's a little bit offensive, isn't it? I mean, we're in a world where you just don't do that thing with women. And the one woman turned around to me and she said, I'd follow him to the gates of hell if I had to. I'd follow him to the gates of hell if I had to. I thought, wow, she's literally prepared to die for her boss, okay? Now, here's some clues, okay? This was at the launch of a company called Virgin Brides. So what does he do? It's a company that they started in the Virgin Group, which organizes your wedding. So what does he do? He doesn't pitch up and make a speech. No, he dresses up as a bride, okay, with makeup on and everything. And he arrives there for the opening of the business. He's also been known to dress up as what he calls a trolley dolly, okay, in the air hostess uniform, and he surprises them, okay. Once apparently he hid himself before the staff arrived on board the airplane. He hid himself in the little luggage compartments at the top. And the reason why he did that was because when the staff actually came on board, one of them was celebrating, 20 years with the company or something like that. And he popped out and he said, surprise, surprise. and he was dressed up as an air hostess, and you know, gave her a hug and a little gift and so on, and they had a wonderful time. So when the passengers finally walked on half an hour later, everyone was in such a brilliant mood, okay? And he swallows his pride, you know, the humility. Apparently at the Virgin head office, which by the way consists of, you know, a grand total of like 7 or 8 people. Okay, at one stage they were on a barge on the River Thames, but they've taken a photograph of all the head office staff, put it upside down and hung it up against the wall to say everything is reversed. We are here to serve our staff. We are not here to be over them. Okay, little symbolic things like this make a big difference. Okay, I had the fortune of meeting him once at the Virgin Atlantic offices, and of course I got to shake his hand, but I didn't take the selfie. Okay, I didn't want to embarrass myself. But on one occasion, I was invited to the opening of the Virgin Active Gym at Old Ed's. And what happened is there must have been 700-800 people there, and there was a cocktail party and lots of vodka flowing, and everyone was having a wonderful time, and there was loud music playing, and there was a huge hubbub and everything. And then about an hour into the evening, there was this even bigger noise around the swimming pool. And the next thing I saw Richard Branson chucking in one of the staff. He grabbed one of the staff and threw her into the pool, but no problem, because about 5 seconds later, he dived in with all his clothes on into the pool. And that's when I couldn't resist it. Then I just took the photograph over there. But you see, he just brings a bit of fun. He makes himself look stupid, but it's okay. It's okay, because he knows that happy employees equals happy customers. Okay, I don't subscribe to that thing that says you can have unhappy employees that give happy customers. No. Okay, and he made that point. If you're not serving the customer, you'll be serving someone who is. Okay, that's really what it's all about. Okay. Having fun with people, how difficult. Having little gestures like high fives, tell lots of stories about, especially about bizarre people, bizarre customers, bizarre employees that have left your company. Give people fun nicknames like the Big K, okay? Dress up for special days, celebrate victories. Ringing of the bell is what a lot of salespeople do when they make a big sale. Have lots of booby prizes and play practical jokes. As long as they're not offensive, it's okay. Generate crazy ideas on how you can compete with the funniest companies. Who is having fun and what can we learn from them? This happened at the Standard Bank call center many years ago. The manager of the whole Standard Bank call center, and there was hundreds of people there, was a chap by the name of Andre Dutoy, and he had implemented this thing called a duvet day. What is a duvet day? Those days when you wake up and you feel like, oh, I just can't go to work today. I just can't face it. I wish I didn't have to go in. He said, fine. If you have earned your right to a duvet day, you don't have to phone me. You can just come in late. You just use your little voucher that you have earned after all, and you can just come in at 10 o'clock or 10:30. I can't remember what the deadline was. And you can just give me this little thing and say, I took a duvet day. No questions asked, no discipline. Nobody will be unhappy. Okay. And he used to give his staff movie tickets and so on as well. Oh, and by the way, the staff became very responsible with those duvet days. They didn't use them to sleep late. No, they would come in and they'd say, "Oh, I had a meeting with my children's teacher today, so I took a duvet day." Or I made the first appointment with the dentist, so I could, be there first thing in the morning, and I took a duvet day. So they became very responsible for that. And on one occasion, apparently, he just handed out to, somewhere like around 100 employees movie tickets for that day. Hey, go out and see a movie. Pre-COVID days, of course. This is one of my clients in Cape Town. He has to remain nameless because he's still not sure how he felt about this, but he made a bad strategic decision that cost the company. It was a software company. It cost them essentially, literally a few million rand, okay? And he acknowledged that, okay? And acknowledging it was publicly was obviously a very embarrassing and humiliating thing. But that's who he was. And then at the next staff party, what he did was he put on this helmet and he said, I've got egg on my face. And he had planted people in the audience, okay, with eggs. And he said, I'm ready now. And what he did was they all came up with an egg and they bashed it on his head and threw them on him and everything. You see, they just loved and respected him a million times more after that kind of thing, okay? Have special days where people come in dressed to work with ridiculous things. We're all coming in to dress to work like Elvis tomorrow. Okay. In one of our clients, they had, the funniest t-shirt today. And this was the runner-up. He had a t-shirt that said, "Video games ruined my life. Good thing I have 2 extra lives." Okay. I mean, it's just fun. We laugh for 5 seconds, but it's like when you go to a fancy dress party, everyone looks at it, "Oh, that was so funny. That's so good." People just loved it. Okay. Another runner-up had a t-shirt with a big apple on it. Okay. And it said something, and I just didn't get a photograph of this, but it said something like 3 apples that changed the world: Adams, Newton's, and Steve's. Okay. So it was, making the point about how apples have been very important in human history. But the winner, and by the way, I must tell you that this company had as the MD and the owner and the founder a German guy. The winner won this prize. Heaven is where the police are British, the chef's Italian, the mechanics German, the lovers French, and is all organized by the Swiss. Hell is where the police are German, the chef's British, the mechanics French, the lovers Swiss, and it is all organized by the Italians. And of course, the CEO and owner of the company said, "I don't care what your committee says. This is the guy who's winning first prize over here." Could laugh at himself. Okay. It doesn't take much. In fact, the employees did all the hard work. All right. Okay. And of course, this biggie of recognition and reward. Okay. It is so, so important. Again, a non-negotiable. This is one of the most powerful ones. The previous managing director of PG Glass, a guy by the name of Trevor Sayer, he used to have this habit of going to the photocopying machine and making a photocopy of his hand and sending out these little handwritten notes. Okay. So this was to Jaco. "Dear Jaco, I just wanted to thank you for the, I can hardly read the thing over there, the extraordinary effort you put into the deal with Cardi's. Apparently Cardi's in some dorpie somewhere had their window broken down and they worked over the weekend. Okay. Over the past few weeks, it's, I can't read it. You can just read it. But the point is, okay, he would then send this in the internal mail to whatever branch it was where this great event happened. And he would encourage the managers, obviously, to send him stories. And what happens is at the branch, they would have a little ceremony the next morning, okay, in their little meeting, 10-minute meeting. And then the boss would always end off and saying, "Hey, we got another one of these from the boss in Joburg today." And then what they would do, I mean, it's so corny if you think about it. He would take this little note and he would pin it to the back of that employee who had gone out of his way to help customers. Okay. So now for the rest of the day, you walk around with a hand on the back, a pat on the back from the boss in Joburg. I mean, it's just incredibly corny. And all the guys who work at PG Glass are all these big guys with, tattoos, and they smoke a lot, and they really rough people. They only shave once a week, and they act as bouncers at the local club every Saturday night. And yet they treasured these little notes. At the end of the day, and by the way, all their workmates would also obviously go and slam them on the back. "Hey, well done," everything. But at the end of the day, they would take this thing off and they would keep it in their locker. It was just such a meaningful, special little thing, and it cost almost nothing, but it was the act that made it. And this particular one, Jaco, was in Kuruman. Doesn't have to cost a fortune. Vouchers, tickets, a company picnic where everybody brings one salad or one pasta or one thing. The company just provides drinks or meat or whatever it is. Okay. Share privileged communication. Hey, listen, don't tell anyone, but I just wanted to show you this thing. Okay. Of course, everyone knows about it. And special projects, which we spoke about earlier, merchandise, clothing, food, all of these things make a difference. And recognition items, trophies and plaques. I know in one particular organization, they had these little packets of lifesavers. You can't find them for love of money these days, but they had these little packets of lifesavers, and attached to the packet of lifesaver with a little ribbon was a blank thing. It looked like a check almost. And what you would do is, if somebody helped you, if you heard a good story about someone, you would just go and grab one of these little lifesavers packets, and you would say, "Thanks, you saved me a lot of trouble at this stage." And they would just hand these things out. Again, people just treasured them. Okay. The Bowles Trophy is once on the day of the annual Christmas party, the MD came to the HR director and he said to him, "Listen, I want to institute a new award today. Okay. And we need a trophy. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but could you arrange a trophy?" So the HR director says to his PA, he says, listen, you better go and find a trophy. The party's in 2 hours time. The boss wants a trophy. And she went to the whole of Southgate Mall and she was looking everywhere. There was no trophy. And eventually she went to all the jewelry shops and she said, have you got something? I need something now. You know, there's things happening in 2 hours time. Sorry, we don't, you know, they have to be on demand. You have to order it in advance. And she doesn't know what to do, and she's just walking past one of those pawn shops, you know, the PAWN, not PORN, you know, where you take your stuff. And she saw in there in the window a bowls trophy. Okay, you know those trophies that you win in bowling tournaments. And she said, well, this is going to have to do. I'll sort this out again on Monday. Okay, so she says, well, you wrap it up nicely. She puts it in a box, and literally with a few minutes to spare, she takes it through to the table where they've got all the long service awards and everything else. And she puts it on the table and she gives a thumbs up to the boss and she says, that's the one. Okay. Anyway, so they do all the awards, the long service, blah, blah, blah. And then the MD comes on and he says, this year, I want to institute a new award. And this award is the Employee of the Year Award. And it's going to be decided by me. And I know it's subjective, but I want to recognize somebody who has done something spectacular this year for us in our company. Okay. So they had all the usual sales rep of the year award and others, but this was now the MD's award. Okay. And he says, and the winner is, and he announces the winner, whose name was Fred. And Fred was the maintenance manager. And Fred was just an absolutely wonderful human being. I got to know him personally. When you meet him, he said, he introduces himself, shakes your hand, and he says, hi, I'm Fred, and I'm an alcoholic. And I last took a drink 32 years ago. Okay. And he's the maintenance manager. But Fred was always incredibly helpful. He would work weekends. People would go to him with advice from their broken toaster from home, and he'd get one of his guys to help. And on one occasion, apparently, one of the employees said, Fred, you know about cars. I want to buy a second-hand car. Will you come with me to the dealership? And Fred examined the car. He's just a wonderful human being. And as the MD announces Fred, they all erupt. Okay, they all give him a standing ovation non-stop. Eventually they had to, like, you know, calm them down, say, okay, enough. And Fred goes up very embarrassed, tears in his eyes. Okay, and they give over the award. But Fred, being who he was, he takes this box and he says, can I open it? And the MD's secretary and the HR director's secretary saying, no. She's trying to say, no, he must open it up. He has the wrong trophy. And everyone's saying, what's the problem? She's saying, no, don't let them open it. And they're saying, oh, you know, I'll talk to you afterwards. Okay. And he takes out this bowls trophy. Okay. Well, everyone, you know, found out the story afterwards. Okay. And at the end of the year, when he had to give it up, okay, and give it back, they said, okay, well, now maybe, about a month later, they went to him and they said, hey, listen, we're going to replace this with a real trophy. And he said, no, I'm not, I don't want this. I want this trophy for the year, okay, my bowls trophy. So they just hung on to it. And at the end of the year, he gave it back and it's continued. And it's this bowls trophy given, you know, just a crazy fun trophy for no reason, for good reasons, but, you know, nobody knows until the legend is told. Okay. If you're going to do recognition and rewards, and I'm going to finish it off in a couple of minutes, okay, then we need to remember something over here. There are some rewards which are intangible and some which are tangible. We tend to like the tangible ones because we can see them, certificates, vouchers, you know, jackets, trophies, okay? The intangible ones are the ones which we struggle with. And then there are some rewards and recognition which are financially valuable. You give somebody a nice company branded jacket with, you know, 800 or 900 Rand, or you give them a weekend away with their family at Sun City or something like that. But there are some awards and recognition which the only value that they have is emotional value. And of course, what we always want to do in companies is go to the bottom left-hand corner. Let's give them something that they can spend or wear or, you know, experience, okay? But in that process, we're ignoring the other three areas. And I can tell you without any shadow of being contradicted, that the most powerful rewards are always in that top right-hand corner where we have honored somebody, where maybe we've put a photograph up in the hero's walk, where we have made them feel incredibly proud of who they are because of what they've done, okay, where we publish an article in the company newspaper, something like that. Their value is not so much financial, but emotional, okay, and they sometimes are intangible, okay. Those are the kinds of rewards, okay. Giving them the parking bay reserved for the chief executive, for a week or a month, things like that, okay. Just some of the rules. Obviously, you got to do in teams as well as individuals, and you got to do them fast. In fact, if you're looking for rules, okay, have a mix of rewards, recognition, and celebration. Celebration is always nice. Make sure that the criteria are incredibly clear in most cases. If it is going to be a subjective thing, then obviously just say, hey, listen, this is my decision. I know it's subjective and people accept it. But don't pretend that they are so objective when they aren't really, okay? Do big and medium and small or instant rewards consistent with the behavior. The small ones often are very powerful. Be consistent and fair in the application, and never, ever, ever, ever let your ethics be questionable. If people feel that they are being manipulated, you're dead in the water. We can't let that happen. Okay. All right, folks. And then the final one, and by the way, there's a lot more stories I could tell you, maybe on another occasion, okay? But the final one is to make them owners of the business. And you do this simply by saying, if you were the owner, if you were me, you get them thinking in an entrepreneurial manner over there. It makes such a big difference. Okay. So folks, those are the 10 E's. And, I don't believe you can, let me just go back here 1 second. Okay. I don't think you can, oops, one more. Okay. I don't think you can, do a handful and then not do the others. You probably need to create a balance. I've drawn it in the shape of a wheel, because if a wheel has got one spoke missing, then the whole thing kind of wobbles. Okay. You can probably do a little bit less of some of them and a little bit more of others, but I think that all 10 of them are areas where you can get involved. So let me end off with a story from one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. His name is Lofuno. So in pre-COVID days, I was using a lot of airports, and I was at OR Tambo. And when I travel, and sometimes it would be 2 or 3 times a week, I'd get onto a bloody airplane, okay? Hated it, okay, but I would always try and make sure that I didn't need to use the public toilets. I just felt like you're going to get 17 diseases if you even just walk in the front door over there. And on one occasion, I left the office too late. I forgot to have a pee at the office. I arrived at the airport, and I just couldn't keep it in anymore. And I walked into the men's public toilet, okay, and there I met Lofuno, okay, this wonderful man with a smile that'll just, light up the whole room. And as I walked in there, Lofuno turned around and he said, "Welcome to my office." Now, we all know why he does that, and you've probably all experienced this, because he kind of, with a smile and with a friendly statement, he gets a little bit more of a tip. And I was quite happy to do that, because he was a very positive fellow, okay, and I really liked him. And I said, "Thank you, Lofuno." And he said, "My name is Lofuno, and I'm going to be of excellent service to you today." I said, "Thank you, Lofuno. I'm very happy to be here." We just had this little script that we played out, okay. And off I went, and I started my business. Now, behind me walked in this huge rugby player fellow, okay. He was wearing shorts in the middle of winter, short socks, kind of short pants and a short shirt. He was a mountain of a man, okay? You kind of get the image. And as he walked in there, Lofuno turned around to him and said, "Hi, welcome to my office." And he sort of grunted, "Yeah," and he said, "I'm going to be of excellent service to you today." "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And he goes and he zips down, and right in the middle of it all, and please don't be offended by the story, but right in the middle of his business, he just lets out the loudest, longest fart I've ever heard, okay? He just lets rip. And of course, everyone just kind of looks at each other, I mean, wow. I mean, this was just disgusting. And he didn't even bother to say, "Excuse me," or anything, Anyway, he finishes his business, zips up, walks out without washing his hands. And of course, that's when, everyone kind of relaxes a little bit. And Lofuno turns around and he says, "Oh, no, that man, he just sent the fax." Okay. And as he said that, we all just broke down. Okay. He just had his script down to the T. It was fantastic. Okay. He was truly an eagle. And it reminded me that day of a wonderful statement that came from the most incredible, one of the most incredible men, equal to, Madiba, Martin Luther King Jr. And he said in one of his speeches, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as a Michelangelo painted, or as Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. And I think that's our job. We need to be able to do that. There's a wonderful a little model, which, if you want it, you can write to me, okay? But it talks about how there's a link between the basic foundation, okay, of your values, your culture, your behaviors, your leadership, all the soft stuff and some of the hard stuff, and how it directly ties to the business outcomes, okay? Your customer lifetime value, etc. But in between, okay, they have made it very clear in this particular model that employee experience is what it's all about, okay? Purpose, alignment, belonging, achievement, etc., etc. Employee outcomes, okay, are the engagement, happiness, and only then is it customer outcomes, okay? If you want to find this, it's in the website called CX Journey Incorporated. I think I'm going to put the link in the chat afterwards, but I think it is so clear to me that this is what it's all about. Okay. So let's finish it off. People want to be great. If they aren't, it's because their managers don't allow them to be, okay? People who feel good about themselves produce good results, again, from the 1 Minute Manager. On the other hand, people who produce good results feel good about themselves, all right? The most important question you need to ask yourself is, why should this mercenary employee stay with us? I've got 12 members on my team. Why should they stay? Given that they've got all these amazing choices, okay, out there, why should they stay with me? And you can answer this question, what can I do to make your job better? That has to be the priority every single morning, every single day, all right? We need to create that nurturing environment and an ecosystem. When you want to plant something in your garden, some fruit or some vegetables or a tree, you've got to prepare the soil and plant the seed and take care of it and feed it and water it and remove the weeds and the barriers to success. But you can't do the growing on behalf of the plant, okay? At some stage, you've got to hand over to the plant and say, well, I've done whatever I can over here. And that's your job, okay? Remember, motivation is a door that is closed from the inside. But if you've created that environment through all of these 10 E's, you will do something spectacular and they will thrive, okay? This one from John Maxwell, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's so simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. So don't ask why the world is not a better place. To that question, there can be no answer. Rather ask, what can I do to make the world a better place? To that question, there are infinite possibilities, infinite possibilities. And this from Zig Ziglar. People often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why I recommend we do it daily. As I said to you, it's got to be a daily thing. And a fun little story, I was at a conference on the Marine Parade in Durban at a big hotel there, and everybody was staying at the hotel. In fact, the company had almost taken over the whole hotel. And on the last day of the conference, the big boss, the chief executive, chairman of the board, supreme commander of the company, woke up early and he went onto the beach and he'd done all his sums about when the tide is in and when the tide is out. And he went and printed, with his feet, he dragged out the words, "Thank you" on the beach, okay? And when everybody woke up, an hour, half an hour, an hour later, they opened their curtains and they saw this message, okay? And of course, everybody found out afterwards, okay, who it was that had done this. And they loved him all the more because of that, okay? He just wrote it literally in the sand and it was gone an hour later, Luckily, somebody took a photograph. All right. So from my side, I know I've gone a bit over my time. I thank you. And please get in touch with me. If there's anything that you need, I would love to communicate with you and engage with you. Bye.